Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're excited to have Chad Williams with us from Innovia Consulting. And Chad's going to be starting a small series on Explore the Possibilities with Power Apps. Before I pass it over to Chad to cover on this topic, I just want to remind you that we are recording this session and it will be available in our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, or I can unmute everyone and we can have a Q&A discussion as Chad goes along during the session. So I'm going to pass it on over to Chad to kick off our presentation.
All right, well, thank you, Angie, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to hopefully build a little bit of interest in Power Apps with you today. So again, as Angie said, this is Explore the Possibilities with Power Apps. And let me focus back over here. There we go. And I am Chad Williams, and so I'm our COO here at Innovia. I have the privilege of getting to work with our very great delivery teams here, and as well as the rest of our teams within the company. So you have my contact information there. And so really just jump right into our objectives here today. So just a couple. I want to give you a bit of an overview of Power Apps. This is not going to be a technical session. So as Angie said, this is a little bit of a series. So I've got a second one that I'm doing. I think it's right about in a month from now, where I'm going to do a little bit more of a technical dive into what I showed you today. So this session is really meant to get your mind thinking about what you can do. So I'm going to give you an overview of Power Apps and talk about how you get data into them, because any app without data is essentially useless. And so I'm going to give you an overview of those, but then I want to get into some demos rather quickly. And so I hope the goal here today is really to get, again, to spark some ideas in your mind, to give you a little bit of a flavor of what you can do with Power Apps. And you know, hopefully that'll plant a seed that might spawn into a neat idea within your organization. So we'll talk about the Microsoft Power Apps and the Power Platform. I'm going to talk about the connectors within there, and these are things that just get data around. Switch gears a little bit to Business Central, because that's all what we're all about here is Nav and Business Central. And so if we're going to use Power Apps, it's likely we want to pull data from Business Central. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll get into that demo. So really about a handful of slides here, and then the rest will be demo. Okay, so starting off with the Microsoft Power Platform. So the Microsoft Power Platform is really what encompasses all of Power Apps, Power BI, which is the reporting suite, Power Automate. Those are really, as I look at it right now, those are kind of the three pillars of the Power Platform. There's artificial intelligence, there's other aspects to this, and it's constantly evolving, and things are being added. So Power Apps is part of this. So the one here, if you haven't heard of Power Apps or Power Flow or Automate, it's now called, it's likely you've heard of Power BI. That's been around now for a number of years. It's probably going on 5-6 years, it feels like almost. But has really come along as a very powerful reporting and business intelligence suite. So if you have not seen that or heard about it or seen any demos on it, certainly dig into that, because if you're looking for a reporting solution, it is a very rich and very graphical utility. And so even from a developer's perspective, which I didn't say at the beginning, but so I started here at Innovia many years ago as a developer. And so at my core, I am a developer, but it has not taken much of those development skills to be able to build what I'm going to show you today. But I get back to Power BI. What I've seen in the evolution of the product when it first came out was a product that, yeah, this is pretty cool, but the developer in me said, yeah, but it's lacking a lot of really, essential features that most users are going to want in a report. And over the years, they've added a lot of that. So it's really become a very powerful reporting tool, and I encourage you to take a look at that as well as what we're going to talk to you about today. So talking specifically about Power Apps now. So first of all, sorry developers. And when I say that, what I really mean is, so what Microsoft's vision with Power Apps is to be able to enable anybody to build an app. And so what they call them are citizen developers. So the idea is to be able to put the power, this power into the hands of people that aren't necessarily developers and allow them to be successful. So it's a very rich tool set, but yet a very simple tool set in that when you build the app, and you'll see this as I build one from scratch here, it's very simple, and everything that you do for the most part it looks a lot like Excel. So you're writing Excel formulas rather than writing big blocks of code that almost always are going to require a developer. So excuse me. So there's a lot you can do with this platform with very little technical development knowledge, if you will. So it's built all on one platform with Office 365 and Dynamics 365. And so what that really does is enable you to connect to anything within the whole Microsoft Azure Office Dynamics ecosystem. So whether you want to pull in SharePoint data, you want to work with Business Central, it makes deployment and sharing easier. It makes security easier. So I'm going to talk about an example here, or of something that I built probably about, it's probably been 8-10 years ago. But we had a number of customers that were expressing interest in some type of a very simple data collection application. And so, our sales and marketing lead, Tom Doran, way back at the time, sat down. We started to talk about this, and we were really noticing more interest in this. And so we said, okay, hey, let's build something. So I built what really was a very simple application outside of Nav with C# and I think it was WPF at the time, that would connect to Nav and allow you to basically do shop floor data collection. So I'd be able to select a release production order, select an operation, and to be able to post quantity and time, report scrap, finished quantity, that type of stuff to it. It would go back into Nav and it could be approved and then posted through the output journal. So that effort took hundreds of hours of work, and it took a lot of work just to build the app. And so then once you got the app built, and anybody, for the developers that are on the phone, one of the hurdles is always, okay, I build it, well, now it works, but I've only got it on my development machine. How do I share this? How do I deploy this? And so that's one of the things that is very easy with Power Apps and being all on this one platform, is that the security is integrated. Your Office 365 login, your Microsoft login that you use is there. So when I want to connect to Business Central, it passes those credentials. I don't have to worry about that. When it becomes time to deploy the application, I simply publish the application and share it with my coworkers. If I need to update it, updates are done easily. So everything that you had to worry about in the past, and you still do if you build these apps, and there's other tools out there to handle it, but there's just a lot less you have to worry about because the platform takes care of it. So the other thing about Power Apps is it's driven by your data. So as I said earlier, an app is essentially useless without some data. So when you look at Nav and Business Central, think about all the different pages that are in there: item cards, customer cards, sales orders. There's really only about a handful or so, 6 or so different page types, so format types. So you've got cards, you've got lists, you've got documents and sales orders and sales order lines, journals, matrices, and different things like that. But there's really only so many. And so one of the really cool things about Power Apps that helps you get started is it can start with your data. So you connect it to your data and it'll build an app based on what that data is and say, hey, okay, you gave me a list of items, which we'll do as an example. it will build an app that provides you the ability to see those items in a list and to be able to drill into what would be like a card representation of it if we relate it to nav. I don't have to build all that plumbing. So it's similar to being able to build a page with a wizard in nav, but this takes a little bit further in that it's not just the single page. It builds out all of the series of pages and then works out all the plumbing between the play pages so that you don't have to do anything with it. It's a very visual tool. So if you're a command line person or just love working in code, which I don't think many people are like, most of us are visual. Even us developers are fairly visual. And so it is meant to be very visual. It's meant to be very easy to work with. Again, going back to being able to enable anybody to be able to do this. As I started to say earlier, the deployment is very simple. So again, once I got that app built, the next challenge was, okay, how do I get this installed on all the machines? How do I maintain and update it? Do I do a click one deployment or how do I do that? So there's a lot of other things out there, but you have to build all of that. You have to set it all up. In this case, I build my app. I hit the share button, I select somebody that's within my organization, and they can get into it. Okay, and then finally, just to put the developers at ease, you do have a role here. So this tool is meant to be simple, but it's meant to be powerful. So there is a role for developers, and there is the ability to put together some really sophisticated apps. These aren't just apps that are very simple. So a number of years ago, Microsoft released something, I think it was called Light Switch, if I remember correctly. And it was, I really look back as that was one of the birthplaces of where Power Apps came from. And that the idea there was to build a development environment that was very easy to use and didn't necessarily require very expert or very senior developers to be able to work within. And so the problem with it was, well, one, you didn't have this whole Azure Office 365, Dynamics 365 ecosystem at the time. So you were still working with on-premise servers and all of the different things, authenticating with Active Directory and everybody's domains. On my inside are four walls, it's somebody trying to access it from outside. And then when it got down to it, from my experience with it, which really didn't last for long because I wasn't impressed with it, was it really wasn't as powerful as it needed to be. So like I said with Power BI earlier, when that first came out, as a developer, I looked and said, well, this is great, but it's missing some fundamental things that you would need, that a customer would want. And so that's what I saw there. So with Power Apps, it really has a lot of that. So am I saying you're never going to have to write a C# app again or Java or whatever you like to program in? No. But there are a lot of things this thing can do, and it takes a much different skill set. But if you need to go deeper, there is a room for development, and you can scale this a bit. So talking about the data, so how are we going to get the data in? So what the Power Platform has are these things called Power Platform connectors. So on the right here is just a listing of some of the example ones that they have, some of the stock out of the box ones. So I can connect to Excel, OneDrive, Dynamics 365, et cetera. So there are many standard connectors, and yes, there are standard connectors for Business Central, SaaS, on-prem, and nav. I can also create custom connectors, and that's really the example that I'm going to show you here is what I work through. And then so in a month when I go through a technical dive of this, that's going to be a bit of what I show. Switching over to Business Central, how do we get the data out of there? So I was going to look before because I forgot the exact version. I believe it was NAV 2017, might have been 2018, but Microsoft came out with these standard APIs. So these APIs are based on, if you've heard of RESTful or a REST API, that's standard REST service, or REST standard, I should say. It is built on that same technology. And so there are 44 standard APIs out of the box. So think of each one of those as a data set or a table. So there's items, there's customers, there might be sales orders, sales lines, GL entries, et cetera. So 44 of those that come out of the box. If you're on BC SaaS, they are ready to use. They're just waiting for you to connect to. Essentially, you have to set up a web key token for your user that you're going to connect to, and then you just connect to that endpoint, and you can start to issue your get and your post, put, etc. commands to that API endpoint. If you're on premise, there's a little bit of setup and so forth that will need to be done. I suspect, and we have every reason to believe, that there's going to be additions to this. So beyond the 44 that it comes with today, we would expect that Microsoft will continue to expand that. And so when you look at that Business Central connector that I mentioned on the previous slide, that's what it taps into to get data out of Business Central. So you might be thinking 44 tables, geez, that doesn't sound like much. There's hundreds, if not over 1,000 tables in Business Central nowadays. What about my custom data? How am I going to get that out? So what Microsoft has done is they also allow you to build custom APIs. And so this is really slick in that it's very simple to do. They have added a new type of page. So like I said earlier, there are really only a handful or so of different page types in Business Central. And so they've added one that's called a type API. And so what I do is I build my page. I surface the data that I want on it. So if I have a custom table, commission ledger entries, and I want to surface the posting date, the employee, the amount, etc., I essentially just build this API type page. I build it very much like I would build a normal page by putting those fields on there, and then whatever fields I've got on there are what the API can interact with, and then the underlying table underneath that. So it does require some code, but it is fairly simple. So it's not going to take a super experienced developer. It's if you've done a little bit with AL, you've written a basic extension. This is not going to be anything that's super difficult to figure out. But you will need a little bit of development help to do this. And so your partner or Innovia would be happy to help you build a custom API if you needed one. And so when you want to use a custom API within the Power Platform or within Power Apps, that's where you have to build a custom connector. And that's what I have done here. And again, that's what I will go through in a technical dive in the part 2 of this series. So let's get into the demo. That's enough talking and slides. So I am going to switch over to here. All right, so I have here is my own tenant. So this is just a demo tenant that we have set up with Microsoft. So this is my own tenant that I play around with. I've got Business Central in here. As you can see, I've got that up. If I hit my little waffle thing here, you can see I've got Outlook, everything else in here. Here's Power Apps, the whole thing. So this is just Kronos database. So this is just the demo database, demo company, I should say, that I've gotten here. I've got a number of environments within here. You'll see that in a minute. I am just in my production environment within this Kronos company. So that's my Business Central environment. So then I also have Power Apps. So this is part of this whole subscription that I have got here in this tenant. And so I have access to Power Apps. And so this is the main homepage for Power Apps. Pretty standard layout, a menu, here on the left. Got some things here right in front of me. I can start with data. I can make my own app. Got some learning opportunities here, and then I can see down below just a history of my apps. And these are some of the apps I'm going to show you in a bit. So what I want to do here is I'm going to build an app here from scratch. And just to show you how simple this is, it's not going to be a pre-canned one. It's not one that I built, a while ago. I'm just going to build it right here. And so what I can do here is I can just start from my data. And so I've got SharePoint, Excel, etc. here. I don't have Business Central, but if I click other data sources, it's going to open this up. And here I've got connections that I can create. So you can see I've got a bunch of these that I've already created. I need to clean these up, but these are connections to Business Central. So if I were going back in here, I could just reuse one I've already created rather than creating a new one, but I'm going to show you creating it from scratch all the way from the beginning. So here is that list of the out-of-the-box connectors that I had shown. So that slide had just a few of these on there, but you'll see there's quite a few, and this list seems to grow every so often when I come back in here. Here you can see the Business Central, SaaS and on-premise, and then down here, Dynamics Nav. So back to that whole one platform thing. So if I select Business Central and go into this, you're going to see here, all I have to do is hit create. I don't have settings to do. If you've ever set up anything, and certainly if you went to the on-premise or the nav, you're going to have to tell it the endpoints. You're going to have to give it credentials because it's going to be authenticating from Azure to your domain. But because this all lives within the Office and Dynamics ecosystem within that Azure tenant here, it knows what everything is. So when I hit create, it doesn't need me to enter a URL that if I have one character missed, I'm going to be spun off into 4 hours of troubleshooting to try to figure out what happened, or if the syntax isn't perfect. If it's not configured right on the service tier or anything like that, it's all set up because of my BC SaaS tenant. It's all set up the way it needs to be so I can connect to it. And it knows to basically just go and look within my tenant and say, and it looks and sees, oh, you have Business Central. Okay, now I'm going to look at Business Central and see what's in there. So if I hit create, it's going to do that. So it's looking within my tenant to say, what do you have in way of Business Central? It finds Business Central, and now it's querying to see what environments do you have. So I mentioned I was in a production environment, but I have a couple of other sandbox environments. So it's looking at those and then looking at what companies exist. And in 1 second here, it's going to return back a list of those environments and companies. And there it is. And so you can see here, so it's asking me to choose a data set. So I've got my production environment, which happens to have 2 companies in it, the Kronos USA that I was in over here, and then there's another company in there called My Company. These other 6 are for the sandboxes. So I've got a sandbox _ dev, and then this last one. And then each of those sandboxes has those same companies in there. So I have to specify which environment and which company within my my Business Central tenant I want to connect to. So I'm going to use this production one and connect to the Kronos USA. So again, no URLs, no security, nothing to mess up and wonder what type of security do I use? Do I enter my username? What's the web key, etc. So what this did then is it connected, and then it gives me back, it spits me back those 44 standard APIs. So here you can see the list of those. So we've got items, customers, vendors. So, some of the main ones, but obviously these 44 aren't going to cover your needs. And for the bulk of this demo, it didn't. And so I had to create custom ones. I am going to just point out one thing down here at the bottom. They do have this enter custom table name. I've not played with this now since probably late last year, so maybe this works now. But what I see here is that when I build a custom API in Business Central, I would be able to just enter the table name here and it would find it, or enter some name in its correct format. I'm not sure what that is. And then it should be able to connect to it. That would be very slick in that it wouldn't require me to build a separate custom Power Platform connector, which is what I had to do today. So this may change down the road, or it may have changed with the recent release. To be honest, I haven't tested it for a while, but it gives me hope that this will get even simpler as we move down the road, which is what we always expect from technology. So I'm just going to work with items. So I'm going to go back up here, I'm going to select items and hit connect. And so now what it's doing is it's looking at that data set and it's building my app from data. So it's looking at it and going, okay, you've given me a list of items. I should probably build an app that gives you a list of those items and allows you to do something with them. So I'm just gonna skip all these welcome messages. So here's this is basically the development environment. So you can see in the center here, I've got the app. I can already see that even though I'm kind of in a design mode right now, it's already got data in it. So it really lets me play with it kind of interactively with my data rather than, in Visual Studio or VS Code, doing a build and compile and then to run it and all of that. It all is very seamless. So I'm not going to do anything here but to go up here and I can hit play basically to run this app. And so you can see the list of items here. So I happen to have a couple of sample items that I use in the rest of this demo here that I've built. But otherwise, these are just the standard Kronos items. So if you're familiar with the Kronos database, those are the items in there. So if I just switch to Business Central here, you'll see I've got my parent item and these two components that I'm demoing with, and then the rest of those items. So if I click on any of these, I can drill into it as I would expect. So you'll see here, so what it's done is it's surfaced some of this data. Now, one of the things that I noticed right away is, well, probably don't want to show these big long GUIDs to an end user. These are probably more internal fields, so I probably wouldn't have added those. But again, it gives you a start. So I'm not starting from scratch. I don't have to build each of these individually, tie all the pages or forms together and then get it to work. It all works, it passes back and forth. So when I clicked into this, it showed me this detail page with the correct item on it. If I go up here, I have this pencil, I can actually edit this. So I'm just gonna put webinar on here so I can edit that. So I'm just gonna change the display name, which is the description, save that, go back here, I can see it updated. If I go back to my list, I can see it updated, but did it actually go back to Business Central? So let me drill into my Athens desk here, and you'll see that the description was updated. So right there, with 4 or 5 clicks and really doing nothing, I've got a pretty good start of an app. And so this is a simple one, obviously, but you can quickly see how if you needed, a simple app that you could use outside of Business Central, it's not incredibly difficult to use or to set up. And so you'll notice here the view of the way this is built, you may be guessing, but it's actually built it for me in a mobile layout. So if so there's a Power Apps app that I load onto my phone. So you go to Android or iOS or Apple Store and download the Power Apps app. And once you have the app, you log into your app and you authenticate with your credentials, the same credentials I'm authenticated with here. And I'm going to be able to run these apps right from my phone. So I could pull this up on my phone, and I usually demo this when I've done this session live, a little harder virtually, so I'm not going to do it. But I can pull this up on my phone and work with this app very easily, and I can share it with others. So if I had somebody that I just needed to do some item maintenance and they were going to do it on their phone or be able to look up items, there you go. It's that simple. So if I go back here, just to give you a little lay of the land again, I'm not going to go through all of this Power Apps development environment. That could be a whole nother session in of itself. But again, it is fairly simple. I wanted to show you here. So you'll see right away at the top, you've got a very Excel-like looking formula or formula bar here. So if I click on something here, you'll see, again, it's very much formula based. So this item dot display name. If I click on the item number, it's this item dot number. So it's meant to be very intuitive and very simple. It's not lines and lines and blocks of code. Over here, I can kind of see a tree view of the apps. So I'm on this main screen here that it called browse screen, but I can see my 3 other screens, which were the details screen here, and then my screen that I can edit on. So those are all there as well. So now if I needed to change this, I could quickly come in here and switch these or remove them or do whatever I need to do with them. All right, so that's just a real simple overview of an app there and how to build one from scratch. So what I want to do now is really kind of get into showing you some of the neat things you can do here. That's cool, but it's pretty simple. So again, so back to the shop floor data collection app that I built a number of years ago. So what I wanted to do was model this out in Power Apps and see if I could build it here, and then start to explore like what other things can I do with it. So this first version of the app was really just trying to model it out. So it's not a complete solution, but the bulk of what I need is there, and it's again was fairly simple to build. And what I built years ago that took, oh, I ran the wrong one. I'll run version 1 here first. So what I did is, just built it based on that item example that I just did, and kind of borrowed the concept and was able to build this app. So I first had to build my custom API and then build that connector. Again, I'll go through that in part 2 of this. But so this is essentially the app. So what it shows me here, and I've only got one, but it shows me my release production orders, and then I can see the item in operation. So the idea here is that I would come in, select the operation I'm working on, and then I can enter my runtime, say 40 minutes, I output 50, and I scrap 5. I could also finish it if I want. I'm not going to. I can just hit submit, clears that. And so now I'm going to just go back to Business Central, get out of the item stuff here. I'm just going to go into the output journal. And so what it does is it just puts that directly into the output journal. So it put in my release production order number, my item, the operation, and then the quantity 50, runtime we had of 40, and then that scrap of 5. So again, fairly simple, but it just, again, trying to plant a seed and just help spark ideas on what you can do with this. So there was more to the other app that I built. There was an approval worksheet that sat in between. But as far as the app itself goes, what it took me to build in C# and WPF at the time, was in the hundreds of hours. This took 4 hours, if that. So, and that's basically coming into it. Hardly have ever written an app before. So that was learning and getting into it. So it's pretty simple, and but yet very powerful in what you can do. So the next thing I want to showcase here is still, I suppose, a little less about Power Apps as it is more about what they've got within Power Apps, which is called AI Builder. So this is where the really cool things I see that you can do. So what AI Builder is let me just click into build here. So this allows me to build what's called an AI model that can do different things for me. So at the top, you'll see here, these 5 are the different types of AI models that I can build right now. And this is evolving. A lot of this is still under preview. Maybe they finally released it, but it's still pretty cool what you can do. So I started with this one right here. It's called form processing. And so the idea here is that you build an AI model and you train it to do something. You train it based on a certain form or document that you've got. So I have right here just a simple production order job card. This is a stock report out of Business Central. It's got my release production order number, routing number, item, operation, work center, all of that stuff on it. So I wanted to be able to do is say, okay, well, that was cool. You created an app. You can select something from a list, but there's nothing really exciting about that. So let's take the scenario where they have the shop traveler and they're going to have this on their phone or some other device, maybe a rugged tablet or something, and they're going to click a picture of it, and then it's going to pick up what they're working on rather than having them select it. So what you have to do is you build this AI model based off of this document, and when you go through this, it's very wizard, very intuitive based. It's going to give you a lot of do's and don'ts in terms of how to make your AI model smarter, if you will, because it's only as good as what you feed into it. And so the better images you send into it, the better it's going to work. But it basically, you give it feed it a bunch of images, I think 15 at a minimum of the document, and then it recognizes, okay, what's the static text, the labels and so forth in the document, then what's changing, and then it can figure out that, hey, those are fields, and it can go, oh, hey, this label says it's the item number. Is this the item number? And then you confirm that. And so it can pick that stuff off of it. So not groundbreaking. I mean, not all that different from OCR technology type stuff, but kind of neat, and just to show you what that looks like. So I'm gonna go back to my apps. Actually, I'm just gonna close out this other one so I don't have too much open. So I'm gonna go to my version 2 here. Okay, so you'll see now it just brings me right into this entry screen. But now I've got this block up at the top here that says analyze. So this is the AI model, if you will, embedded in here. So this is the text recognition control that's linked to my model that allows me to do this. So I hit analyze. So analyze, I'm running this on my PC, but I could easily click a picture on my phone and have that feed right into it. So I'm just going to use this document that I've got here, hit that. So it's looking at the document, it's generating, or it's comparing it to what it knows in its model and trying to pick up the information off of that page, and it will populate it into the screen. And so you really can't see this. This is one of the unfortunate parts of this demo, is that this little window is so small, but you can see things are in blue here. And if I could zoom in on that really good, and then the resolution looked all right, what you would see is that it has circled or highlighted each of the fields it recognized. It has labeled what the field is as far as the field name and then the field value. So then in the formulas that I wrote behind here, I can go and reference those and pick those off. So I told it to go get the order number, the item number, and the operation number. So rather than entering those, and then I could still enter my data here. So just enter that, and then I can post it. And then that goes over here, and that's going to have another line in my output journal with those values. So, okay, that's a little bit cooler, but what else can we do? So the other one here is called object detection. So I've seen a number of demos on this where they would train, they basically build an AI model to recognize a 2-liter bottle of soda or a liter bottle of soda, whatever. And so the one demo was of Mountain Dew bottles on a store shelf, and he could take a picture of it, and it would quickly do an assessment of how many were there or what was there and how things look. I've seen another demo where it was recognizing, isolating parts that looked the way they should, and then the other ones were labeled as defect. And so there's a lot of different things you could do with this. And again, you build a model based off of a bunch of images of something. So, and that something is an object. And so when I built this late last fall, I was looking around the house thinking, oh, what's something small that I could take on a plane and use at the demo where I was doing this. And I've got a bunch of them, right? So I wear contacts. So if you wear contacts and you get this brand of saline solution, you might recognize these. But so these are just contact cases. And so every time you buy the solution, they throw one of these are in the box. So, and my wife wears contacts, so these things are laying all over the place, except for when you want one, seems like. So I grabbed a couple of these, and so this is what I use to train it. So this is my part that I'm going to work with. So you take a bunch of images of it, and again, it'll walk you through a wizard. It needs a minimum number of pictures, but the more you give it, the smarter the engine becomes. And the other thing is that how you frame up the pictures, the smarter it becomes. So this one is actually a kind of a bad example in that it's just sitting on a white piece of paper is how I did this. You want to do that, but then you want to also train it to recognize your item or your object amongst other objects. And so if you only ever lay this on a piece of white paper, if I laid this with something else, it may not be able to pick it up. So again, it's only as smart as what you feed it. And uh, and again, there's a lot of information when you go through building the model that will help you make it smarter. It gives you a lot of recommendations and advice and tips on how to do that. So that's my object. So I'm going to go back to my apps here, and we'll go to version 3 here. And so you may have guessed already, but so now I've got basically the same one, but now I've plugged in my object detection here. And so what I want to do here is now I'm just going to again select the image. I could just take a picture if this was on my phone. So I'm going to select that object. It's going to analyze it, and it's going to look for anything that it recognizes in there. And so it did. It recognized 2 items in there called item 1000. And so you can see it put a little box around it. This is similar to what was in that form that I showed you that was too small to see. If I could zoom in on that, it kind of did the same thing there where it put this box around there and to highlight what it found. So it brought in that item number for me. So again, you know, no surprise here, I can enter whatever I want and post that, and it sends it over to the output journal. So, okay, well, that's cool, but if you can recognize the image, you've got to be able to count it, right? So that's what this last one is. So now what I'm going to do is select that same image, but now what I've got it told it to do is, so don't just get the values from what you found, tell me how many there were. So you'll see down here after it analyzes, it's going to fill this in with how many it finds, which we can see there's 2, so it should put 2 in here. And it's taking a little bit of extra time to think, of course. So this would be just a simple example of, you know, if you had something where, you know, they were outputting it and you could click pictures of it, you know, you'd have to have the right scenario, but the idea being, you know, that it can pick that object up and see it. So this would, I'm not sure why this is just sitting and spinning. It's because I'm doing a live demo, I suppose. But really all it's going to do whenever it comes back is just fill in the item like it did in the last screen, and then just pull out that it was 2. So part of what I can get from this little control up here is tell me what you found, what item did you find, but then also give me a count of there. So there it went. So give me that count. So it told me there were 2 in there. And so, so again, a simple example, but again, hopefully this is just sparking some ideas, because as I look at this, I think of a lot of different things I can do with this. And when I did this session at Summit last year, you know, had a pretty good sized audience, even for being the last session of the week. And you know, really, you know, got a lot of good discussion from the folks in attendance there of just the different things that this you could use with this. So so take some time, you know, think about this. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. It's something here that we are making an investment in Innovia. We've got folks that we are putting through more and more training with Power Apps, and so we see you know, we see a lot of opportunity with it, and I think it can bring a lot of simple things to your business. I know some other examples I've seen where one was a windshield replacement, where they could then take a picture of the windshield before they took it out, and then they could take a picture after, just so they had it for reference. So they could bring up that app on their phone. The other one, that's a pretty widely shown demo. If you were at Summit, you may have seen it. Was one for a roofing company, where they were doing some of that. So it's just gives you a lot of ability. And again, because it's all on this platform, it makes it very easy to say, hey, I want this to be able to run on my cell phone or a tablet or whatever. You're not bound to, oh, this has to run within my 4 walls, or the IT department getting all stressed out because, oh, you want to expose this to the firewall. Oh, wait a minute, what's this going to do? Is this going to make our network vulnerable? So a lot of that stuff, just, it's not that you don't have to worry about it, but there's not you kind of don't have to worry about it because it's taken care of uh, throughout the whole Azure tenant, the whole platform. So, all right, so that's essentially the demo. So I'm just going to switch back to the slides here, and we'll wrap us up. Okay, so just to share here in closing, so I did have some suggested resources. So my experience walking through this again, now this is 6 months ago, but my experience was there's some good information out there, but there wasn't a lot. And so there's a lot of good stuff from Microsoft that'll get you started, but there weren't a lot of things that help fill in the blanks. So if you're familiar with sometimes when you go through Microsoft, some of the documentation, they'll give you examples on stuff, but it's always 5 degrees off of what you need in the real world, if you will. So it's always missing something, and it usually is something very critical and essential to making it work. And so that was really some of the hurdles here was in finding out, okay, how do I build the custom API in Azure? That was, or in Business Central, that was really simple. So that's really this one here. This first one is just getting started with Power Apps, give you an overview there. There's a ton of training out there. This is the API overview, so to give you an idea of that. This Connect Apps one was one of the better ones that I could find that helped bridge the gap of, okay, I'm going to build a custom API in Business Central, but then how do I plug that into a Power Platform custom connector? And so there wasn't a lot of really good information, piecemeal, something of this, something this, and then something, in the middle was missing. So there potentially is more out there on the web now. But these were some of the better ones that I found. So again, this Connect Apps one will help in some of those areas. Here's the getting started with custom APIs in Business Central. So this one actually isn't Microsoft, this was a community post that was a good example of how to do it. Again, one of the struggles, and I mentioned it earlier about having to deal with URLs. One of the struggles was just what was the exact URL format of the custom API, and then it was changing while I was doing this because a major update was being released last fall. So so some of that has become easier, but again, that's all stuff I want to cover in this part 2. There's custom connectors for Power Apps, and then finally there's that last one is on the AI Builder itself within the Power Platform, giving you some ideas on what that can do. And I think that's really what, so the Power Apps are really cool, and there's a lot of things you can do with them. But the AI side of it, is just, it's always been on our minds, right? AI is just, it's kind of been the sexy thing out there. It has been for a number of years in technology, but it's helping bringing it closer to reality and to something I can actually use. And so it is really interesting to me, and I just think there are a lot of possibilities out there for folks. And with that, that is what I have. So Angie, do we have any questions? I didn't hear anything while I was going, but.
Thank you, Chad. No questions have come through at this time, but if anyone does have any, please feel free to go ahead and type them in and Chad can get them answered for you. We'll give just a couple moments. How does the licensing work?
Oh, I knew somebody was going to ask that.
A 365 named user?
Yeah, so I believe, so I am not so first of all, I'll say I am not a licensing expert. Perhaps this is a topic I can have this gentleman down here in the corner, Jeff Progowski, if you can make his face out, maybe have him do a mini session on at some point. So I know that within my tenant, I have an Office 365 E5 user license, and so that's given me access to all of that. I don't know, I know E5 is the top tier, I think, of the Office 365 license. I think there's an E3. I don't know exactly all of the details of the licensing side, but it is part of my Office subscription. And so, yeah, so it still would be a named user, so you have to authenticate to it. I do not know, well, so there is another thing that they have added, it's called portals. And I believe the idea there is when you want folks outside of your organization. So if you wanted a vendor or a customer to be able to come into a portal and do something, I believe that is the avenue for that. And that is, I'm certain, has its own licensing model of that. So I'll make a note of that. That's certainly a topic that we could present on. If you do want further information on that, whoever asked the question, just shoot me or Angie an email, and we'll get you either get you the right information or get you in touch with Jeff, who can probably get you that information. Are there other questions?
Nope, that was the only one that came through.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll kind of just wrap us up here. Certainly, if another one comes in, you know, just interrupt me, Angie. But just a reminder for our for any upcoming events, you can check that out here on innovia.com/events. And if you want to learn more, again, I'm Chad Williams. My email is right there. So certainly reach out to me if you have any other further questions. And with that, I just thank you for taking the time this morning. I hope this has helped just give you a little bit of an idea of what you can do with Power Apps. And if you're a little bit more technically focused, tune in about a month. Again, if you go to that innovia.com events, you should see that up there. And that next session that I'm doing, I will get a little bit more technical and walk through how I built some of this. And so thank you. And Angie, I'll pass it back to you then.
All right, Chad, thank you for presenting. And to everyone on our webinar today, or if you're watching on demand, we just want to thank you for joining us. And I do want to let you know that we do have some more webinars coming up soon. Tomorrow, we have Gary Harpenow from Innovia Consulting, and he's going to be presenting on easily create training and so much more with ClickLearn. And also tomorrow in the afternoon, we have one of our ISVs, Notice, and they're going to be presenting on speed up your collections with AR automation. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. We're always adding more webinars to our website, so check those out and register. And Innovia has a podcast that is going on. If you have not heard of it already, it's called the Innovia Conversation. And we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that Steve Waltz and Jeff Pergolski have provided to us. You can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out our selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. And Innovia Consulting is proud to be a premier sponsor of Community Summit, which is coming up October 6th through the 9th in Nashville, Tennessee. Currently, it is still in person, but it has gone to a virtual option as well. So Summit is the annual gathering for all Microsoft Dynamics Nav and Business Central users and supporters. And this event is full of great sessions to help you develop leadership skills, improve Nav BC skills, and learn how to get more from the investment our companies have made in the tool that we use to run our businesses every day. So check out our conference page, and that's innovia.com/conferences for more details and to save on your summit registration. All right, everyone, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great week, everyone.